So, welcome to Therapist in Conversation, chapter, episode number 11. 11 months already, and we're still going. We're kind of going small and a bit larger and small and a bit larger, but we're going. So, tonight we're going to be talking about being stuck, getting unstuck, finding balance in turbulent times, because we're experiencing a little bit of turbulence at the moment. So let's see what's going on with everybody. Susan, let's start with you for a change.
Well, finding balance, interesting. I have to say, finding balance within myself, keeping focused every day, I think is very important throughout these turbulent times. I have lots of different lists. I have my TiC lists just to keep myself focused on what I need to do, because I do find being in lockdown, you have this extra time and it's finding motivation to do things. With my clients who I speak via Zoom, I'm finding this time seems to be much harder overall. The mental health, people seem to be affected a lot more this time round. I think for some reason, it was a novelty, the first lockdown. They sort of got used to it. And then we had that little period of time where things sort of went back to semi-normal. And I think that gave everyone this false sense of security, and they thought, yeah, we can get back to what we were doing before. Fabulous. And then when the second lockdown came in, and not expecting it to be as long as it has been, the clients that I am speaking to at the moment are just needing that little bit of extra support, if you like, and that little bit of extra time on the calls, just to speak about the various feelings that they're having at the moment. So it's kind of a double-edged sword at the moment. It's looking after myself and my well-being, but also just supporting my clients through this period of time.
Cool. Angela, you do this for a living.
Putting people in balance. Yeah, the first step of any of my client sessions is making sure my client is in meridian energy balance. So it's making sure that all the meridians in the body are nicely balanced and the energy's flowing properly. And I think it is such an important thing. I mean, recently I've been talking in my newsletter and on social media about a work-life balance. And it's your energy needs to be in balance and your work life needs to be balanced. And there's so many different facets that need to be balanced for us to feel good. And I think what I was focusing on recently in the conversations I've been having is around, are we working from home or are we living at work? And where does the balance sit on that point? And are people having that time to step away to continue to look after themselves and feed their souls, as well as keeping the lights on and doing the necessary that needs to keep getting done? And totally getting where Susan's coming from. I've heard a lot of people in networking talking about how this lockdown's been more difficult. I've not seen it a huge amount with my clients. I think most of them do so far tend to be sticking with the balance. Everyone's having their ups and downs, some bigger than others. But on the whole, I'm finding that the balance is pretty much there.
Yeah, see, I think from what Susan was saying, and also I recognise it from some of the things that I've been hearing and reading about recently as well, I keep hearing this, we didn't expect the lockdown to last so long. Why?
So I didn't come into it with any expectations.
No,
So from my perspective, it's not affected me from that concern, because it's just a case of, well, when the things change, I'll deal with them when they change. At the moment, this is just the status quo. Keep going.
It's almost like there's an energy of this kind of grasping for the safety belt thing going on. That somebody's throwing this round ring in the water and going, this is your safety, this is your inflatable device. The lockdown's not going to be that long. And then everybody's swimming towards this idea, the lockdown's not going to be that long. And they keep pulling the thing away from them. And
it's not going to be that long. We're going to have a 2-week lockdown.
Yeah, because a virus that's just new on the planet and doing this is always going to say, yes, I'm only 2 weeks long. You only have me for 2 weeks, and then it's bye-bye.
But I guess my point from that is it's 2 weeks long that started a year ago this week.
Yeah.
So actually...
And we were told everything was in we'll review this in 3 weeks. We'll review this again in 3 weeks.
Yeah, but...
And those 3 weeks became a year and a bit.
This is where the difference comes, balance-wise, of what people hear and what people say. Because when somebody says review in 3 weeks, people are thinking, oh, well, that means they're going to make a decision and it's going to stop. They're going to be reviewing, because that's a backward motion, about what happened and how it happened, and they're going to have answers about, that's it, stopped. But of course,
but how much of that review when we get to 3 weeks or whatever the time period was because the people in charge didn't want to put the cat amongst the pigeons and say, do you know what, this could last for like a year.
There's a massive fear about the not knowing. Yeah. And what the reaction would be to people in charge going, guys, we don't know. We've got to learn this. This is something new. And this is a virus that, we said it right at the very beginning. If we approach this as this is an invasion from an invisible alien force, and we will treat it and we will respond to it as a war. Yeah, we're going to be better able to cope with it. If we treat this like it's the flu and we're going to be over it in a couple of days, a week at best, we'll get a vaccine. We don't take into account that this is a biological entity that wants to survive. And for it to survive, it needs our lungs. So it's going to do everything it can. It's going to adapt. It's going to flex. And if we don't flex with it, then it's going to get us.
Yeah, and that's
that balance comes in.
Yeah, and that's the thing about being unbalanced and being stuck. You get stuck because you can't actually take your foot out of the past. And we can't take our feet out of the past because we want to get back to normal. And basically, there is no freaking normal.
Normal is yesterday.
I'm not going with your we comment either. I'm
no,
whatever.
What I'm saying is,
Angela, you are already
what I'm saying
flexible.
is the we is in commas. It is in inverted commas. Yes. It's not actually me that's saying we.
Yes. No, I know.
The newspapers, the people on I don't watch the television that often, but it seems to be that every time I turn the blooming thing on, there's somebody doing something about this. We want to get back to normal.
So don't turn it on.
I try not to, but Perry Mason comes on, So.
And Angela, there is a whole heap of professionals, yourself included, who have that understanding that in order to maintain our balance, we have to move. We have to blow with the wind in a sense. We've got to flex. And when we don't, it's very easy to get knocked over in that wind. And the best kind of balance doesn't come from standing still. It comes from movement. And we've had a system for a year and a bit that says we're going to stand still and this is just going to go past us. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
I mean, people's routines have totally been thrown out of the window, and they've had to find new coping mechanisms with no help or support. Everyone's had to find their own way through this past year, and some people have embraced it, and they have used the time to find new goals and new skills and study and embrace it for the time that it's given to people. And others have absolutely dreaded this time, and they're having to find new ways of supporting their children that have been at home school. So the stress on that, when you're working from home and you're trying to help your child study, that's been quite stressful. So there is an awful lot that this last year has, people have just had to find their own way through, and by doing that and getting through from one year to the next, they're sort of finding this very odd balance of juggling everything, whether it's learning the new IT that they now have to learn. You know, a year ago, if you said to people, let's do a Zoom call, they'd be like, okay, how do I do that? Now it's natural, just like picking up the phone. You know, people have come a very long way in such a short space of time, just to be able to learn how to cope with this, not just for themselves, but just for work and survival.
And if nothing else, that actually shows how adaptable people are. But we forget that when it's, you know, we tend to keep it in little boxes, if you excuse the expression, with what we're dealing with at the moment. And it's more or less a case of, how can you not see that you're able to adapt with this, so you're going to be able to adapt with the circumstances that are going on outside. We have to be able to build a bridge between the ideas of adapting to this can be meaning that we can adapt to other things as well. Because we do it and don't even realise we're doing it. But we're at the top of the food chain because of it.
So I thought it was really interesting the way, Susan, you said that if you'd said a year ago, let's jump on a Zoom call, and people would say, how'd I do that? What I found at the time was people are like, what is that? That doesn't sound like something I want to do. I'm not interested. And it has been remarkable. I've spoken to a couple of people recently who have never done a Zoom call. Still, they're not interested. It's not something for them. And it's not just the older generation. I mean, my 90-year-old grandfather is on our Zoom call once a week, and he will be again in about an hour's time. So we're still doing that for him. So it's not necessarily the older generation. There are a lot of people my age and younger who are saying, I've got no interest on doing a video call. I don't want to do a video call, and I don't want to learn. So for me, those people not adapting kind of makes a little bit more sense, because they don't, in some cases, they don't want to. But then it's exactly as you're saying, Leslie, for those that have said, cool, bring it on, let me see how to do it, and I'm going to work out how to use it. And then still saying, I want to get back to normal. I want to go back to what life was like a year ago.
Yeah. And
that's never going to happen again.
One of my most favourite things that I keep saying at the moment, and even I'm getting sick of it to a certain extent, is one of Einstein's quotes: "You cannot solve today's issues with yesterday's solutions. You have to get new solutions for new problems. You have to start thinking around.
Yeah, the issues are new.
Yeah."
The other thing to bear in mind, Leslie, is that the planet is grieving in a way we have never grieved before. We're not just grieving for the loss of life, and that is extensive, and I don't want to belittle that, but we're also grieving our structures and our coping capacities for the world as it was a year ago.
I think that's the bigger grief. I think the bigger grief is the loss of habit, of familiarity, and I think that's the thing that, you know, home is now somewhere that we're beholden to be in, instead of somewhere we come back to after going to work and doing, going out to the shops or whatever. We're actually told we have to stay in the house, and nobody really likes that idea that they have to do something when they had the freedom not to do it before. But when you say the planet, I think you mean humanity. The planet itself is grieving to the extent where it's showing us exactly its displeasure about what's been going on. And I think that part of that has got to do with how we are actually responsible for our actions in that department too.
And I think all of that plays out in the cognitive actions of humans. And we're all realizing that we have had an impact on the planet around us in a way that was never really in our face as much as it has been this year. We've also seen how quickly the planet can heal when we're not destroying it. And how
on the
quickly
surface, as far as the atmosphere is concerned, on the surface, yeah.
No,
However,
and the waterways and the atmospheric air, everything else, but also the fact that the idea of how we used to live has died. And as much as we keep hearing, I want to go back to the way it was died. When somebody dies and we want to go and see them, but we can't. They've died. We can't go back to grandma's house afterwards. That's done. We've got to move past the grief of what has passed. And our balance, just like any grieving process, is going to be knocked.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is with that though, is a case of a lot of us can't seem to let it be. It's a case of picking the scabs off the wounds and trying so hard, gripping so hard onto that idea of normality that, you know, that they're not actually looking forwards, they're always looking back. And that way they're going to get sideswiped, they're going to get hit by a big surprise. And it's not going to be...
But that's not new with just this pandemic.
No, I know, that's just it. That's just it. The whole thing is that
there's a lot of people who are stuck and not wanting to move forward because it's comfortable where they were.
But interestingly enough, this pandemic is manifesting that on the big screen, if you like. It's a case of we've ourselves worked with people who are out of balance mainly because they're hanging on to stuff from the past that really is not serving them. They can't get past the idea of moving forward without that being part of their lives, without that identification of that issue. And basically, I think it's the Buddhist concept of staying in the moment means that you will always be free, because you're not anchoring anything, casting out into the future to look for something that's not there yet, and you're not casting back to the past and anchoring yourself there. You're actually going to be in flow when you're in the present, when you're at one with yourself and being forward. But this idea that we can actually just hold everything with us. I mean, I don't know about you, but if you've ever tried walking up a set of stairs with all the washing without the basket.
I live in an upstairs flat, I'm fine.
Well, you know, I've got a husband who puts interesting things in washings. So, you know,
we don't need to go there.
things fall out.
Let's just put that one down.
Let it be. I've got it. Let it be. It's in the past.
Exactly.
Now he does his own washing. He carries his own washing up and down the stairs.
Puppies are happy because they live in the moment.
Yeah, all animals are happy because they live in the moment.
Same with babies.
Yeah. And this is where, you know, you're right. The Buddhist idea of the moment of freedom is in the present. The moment of freedom is not in the future. It's not in the past. And we, as humans, we hold on to structures. We look for structures. We look for patterns that give us stability, but we can only see them behind us because we've experienced them. And if we've experienced it, then we know that it works. And thank you very much. That's what I want to hold on to. And we are grieving that that's gone.
But that's also the reason that we can't go forward, because when we've had a bad experience in the past, we tend not to think in a generalization way. Sorry, Angela. We tend not to think that we're going to be able to go and do that in the future because it hurt before or it turned out badly before. So I'm just going to stay here in my little rut. I'm just going to stay here in my groove and not going to move at all. And it's this idea that at one point there's this big raging river that's coming down and it's going to actually flush you out of your rut. And then what are you going to do, because you're not going to be prepared for it?
Are you ever prepared for the massive changes? If you'd asked us 13 months ago, were we prepared for this to hit us and to come and do what it's done?
Well, there's always the possibility of it. I mean, we had an inkling when we had bird flu. We had an inkling when we had the SARS
But they never came to
They
anything.
never came to anything. But there was still, in the countries that they were coming to something, there was still a lot of mask wearing and a little bit of unease. And so this was an indication. And there is somewhere that we could have been looking at situations where, what did we do right? What did we do wrong?
And we can never prepare for every eventuality.
No.
But what we can prepare for is responsiveness rather than reactiveness.
Yeah.
And this is where I think the last 13 months, it is 13 months since this started to kind of show its teeth. We still haven't got past the idea of a reactionary process compared to a responsive process. And the art of being in balance is responding to what is happening around us by being in balance inside us and then balancing off against what's outside us, rather than trying to balance what's outside us, because we've got no control over, and then trying to use that to balance us.
Well,
It never works.
You'll know about that anyway, because with martial arts, you have to respond, not react. You have to have your low centre of gravity. You have to understand that the other person, you have no idea. You might have a clue because you've seen them fight before, but when they're fighting you, it's a totally different thing. And it's each person's response to the stimuli that's going on that makes the difference.
It's that internal balance that allows you to respond. And it's that ability to not try and control what is outside of you. How many of us in the therapeutic arena, in the coaching arena, are telling clients the same thing? This is about your internal locus of evaluation, not the external. You cannot control what is outside you. You can only respond to it. But the stronger you make your internal responses, the more balanced that becomes, the easier it is for you to respond to the pressures outside.
Were you listening into my client call last night? Because that's pretty much what I was saying.
Ladies and gentlemen. But this is the conversation that we've been having with professionals right across the country, but also our international members, because this is not a UK-centric kind of situation. This is global. This is humanitarian. And if anything, Mother Nature has given, I've said it before, Mother Nature has grounded us, sent us to a room until she can clean up the mess we've made.
Yeah.
And like most teenagers, when we're sent to our rooms and we don't like it, we kick against it. But actually, Mother knows best, as it were, that we need this time to actually rebalance ourselves, calm ourselves down, get into a place where we can respond to the world around us. I don't think she's actually told us to go to our room and think about what we've done, but
but it's not far off it.
It's really damn close, and I think when we talk about the balance, we're still seeing the guidance from the establishment as working from an external point of control, rather than taking the opportunity to learn from the psychological arena, the lessons that have been kind of garnished over decades, to say, actually, do you know what? It's not the external stuff we need people to be understanding right now. It's the internal balance that we need to be focusing on. It's the mental balance with the emotional and the physical that we need to be focusing on.
Yeah, because
not just telling people to stay at home.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you say to someone. If you can have 4 people, 5 people, 10 people, 150 million people, and you tell them all the same thing, not one of them will hear it the same way.
Of course not. Because we've all got our own filters, we've all got our own life history, we've all come to this point that we're at right now by a different path. because none of us have walked the exact same path.
And none of us can.
No.
Because it's not anybody else's path we can walk. There's not much point in that. As Oscar Wilde said, you best be yourself because everybody else is taken.
Yeah. But it's interesting when you're talking about all the balance stuff. I've kind of got in my mind this idea of the kind of balance balls you get at the gym, the kind of the Swiss ball half and then the plate on top, and you've got to stand on it and balance. And to me, it's one of those ones that you're constantly, if you train your core to be able to balance on something like that, then when you are coming across issues where the surface isn't completely flat, you've got a little bit more stability. And I guess for my question would be, how do we work with our clients to do that training when things are okay, so that when things aren't okay, they've got the tools there to keep going and to be balanced? And Leslie, you've not answered anything, so there you go. There, you can answer that one.
You keep doing this to me.
Look, you keep saying you want me to take over. If I only ask you one question at a time, then we're good, right?
Yeah, okay. Well, maybe. So, so when
Leslie, this is where you have the get out clause of say, I will give a written answer in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, well, I don't work like Bojo. No, basically, we're all in some kind of turmoil in places in our life and spaces. I think that most of us can say that we've experienced imbalances of sorts. So it's choosing the time to recognise when you've been in an imbalanced state, that you can say, remember that time when? Well, now you're balanced more than you were then. What does it feel like? Feel the difference. Understand the difference between the two states and work on the state that's balanced and strengthen it, and then say, all you have to do now when you feel that you're getting a little bit is go with that movement, is understand that you have the balance inside you. All you have to do is connect to it and go for it, and then basically teach them how to make that connection and teach them how to use the resources that are there that they've forgotten that they had. Because unless you're dead, you've come through every turbulent time in your life so far.
You've had 100% success rate at survival.
Yeah.
You know,
but the interesting thing that what we tend to do is we tend to forget how we did it, because when the adrenaline's gone and everything's, and your memory sort of has this wonderful way of going, yeah, we'll just take that a little bit away from here, and we'll just take that a little bit away from there, and then you can forget that. I mean, I remember when asking my mother what it was like to give birth and how painful it was, and was it painful, and she said, I don't remember. And I looked at her and I said, what do you mean you don't remember? How can you not remember that? And then, of course, I had an injury with my back, and I cannot remember that pain. I know it was painful. I know it was absolutely excruciating, and I couldn't walk for 3 months. But I don't remember.
That's the thing about pain, though, isn't it? Once it's gone, we forget it.
But this is it about imbalance as well. Unless you're in a constant state of it, which is, at the time, you cannot perceive of any or conceive of any other state of being. Until you get through that and realise there is a state on the other side of that, how are you going to recognise that you're actually not in balance at all?
About those points of reference, isn't it? And allowing somebody to anchor those points of reference and show them the journey that they've been through, as where were those flash points, where were those pressure points, what state is it now? And if you think this situation's bad right now, could it be any worse? Well, what about if this was to happen tomorrow? What about if that happened the day after that? And really show that actually the situation that you're in now, however harsh it might seem, it's not the worst it can be.
Although when you're in lockdown, there's less chance of being hit by a car. Notice I didn't say no chance.
There's less chance, yes.
This is me talking, and I've actually managed to do that. But never mind.
There's less chance of you breaking yourself at the gym because the gyms are closed. Yeah, there's loads of things that you can look at that.
I don't know about that. Well, you're at the gym, but when you take the gym equipment out of the gym and put it in the living room, there's
I'm not
a good chance that
but I'm not thinking about taking it out. I specifically said.
Listen, I was
Two
on
corners,
that the other day
ladies.
doing some primal movement, and I'm telling you, I hurt myself.
Yeah, but you could hurt your. We won't go there.
Yes. I am very good at doing that. I am very good at doing that. But yeah, so it's a case of also listening to yourself. I did a live yesterday and I was talking about mithering, and because one of my technical issues, Angela, you weren't around, so I didn't actually ask you about it.
I'm glad I was busy.
I did a live on Facebook, and I always do it through Zoom now because at least then I've got the recording. Because sometimes when you do a Facebook Live on the laptop, it can disappear and stop working, and it doesn't tell you that it stopped. So I did this, and the only thing that I did differently was I popped the lid of my laptop down because I was talking to my husband, and so it's his fault. And
Always.
so, yes, of course, that's what husbands are for. And so I popped the lid down, and then I went upstairs, I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? And I came running back downstairs again and opened the lid up, and it had gone. Now, when I'd done this before, I opened the lid up and the little box came up, converting your video, do you want to continue? But there was nothing, absolutely nothing at all, and I still haven't found it. However, last night, I was going through it and I started to go down this rabbit hole of where is it, why can I not find it, what did I do wrong, how does this work, and you've seen me do it before, Angela, you know how pretty that is. And basically I was getting...
Why I'm busy whenever she needs tech support.
Yeah, totally getting imbalanced with the idea that I had done something wrong, and I thought, but actually it doesn't matter. And there was a switching point, and I recognised the switching point. However, a few years ago, that switching point would probably have been after I'd put something through the wall, kicked a couple of dustbins, gone out and had a flaming row.
Police Scotland are on standby.
Yeah.
Leslie is beside a laptop. Let's get them on standby.
Yeah.
And it's that difference, isn't it, between the reactive state and a responsive state. And when we can work with clients, when humans in general can get to a more responsive state of thinking, they make decisions differently than when they're reacting. And when I'm, reactions versus responses is one of the staples of the most successful people and the most successful companies on the planet, because they are always working to be more responsive to the environment around them than reactive to it.
Do you think that we're taught the difference between reaction and responsiveness in school?
No.
Do you think we're taught it at home?
No. Because what tends to happen is we have a state of mind that is naturally reactive. And unless someone comes along and resets that and reintroduces the idea of responsiveness, we go from reaction to reaction to reaction. And the people around us tend to be similar mindsets. Therefore, they are reacting to our reaction. We're reacting to their reaction. It's like a hand grenade going off in a firework factory.
And also, we're reacting to the reaction of learning how people reacted when they were reacting to people that they'd seen reacting to things too.
Exactly. And the chain reaction.
Yeah.
And the chain reaction then allows all of that generational transference, all of that projection, all of that assumption to be made about how things will happen. And we know one thing about assumptions.
Yes.
They're the mother of all mess ups. But an assumption is not the action. The assumption is the thought. If we act on the assumption, we prove ourselves a fool. because the assumption is only our perception of what our experience is telling us. Our action is either based on that assumption or it's based on a response. And if our reaction is feeding the assumption, we never get to a responsive state. And we're always going to be reacting on top of reactions. When we want balance, we have to respond. Just going back to the martial arts point that you raised earlier, and I know you've had experience with some of that yourself. If you are not able to respond and you are preempting because you make the assumption of what's going to happen next, very quickly you're going to find yourself flat on your back with everybody else walking away.
I'm sensing that little smile as Leslie's saying, I've been there.
Oh, yeah. Listen, I managed to throw myself a couple of times.
Who is that? No, don't. No, I'm not asking the question. We don't have that kind of time.
Yeah, but it's all about the balance situation. It's a case of the other person was perfectly balanced and just had to get out of my way.
And the thing with balance in taking it away from that, if we use the concept of balance, we need to have a wide stance. The wider the stance, the more balance we can get. That's about the same as the way we look at ourselves. And the wider the stance we have as individuals is based on the knowledge and the understanding and the experience base that we have. So the wider we can make that knowledge base, that experience, that exposure to knowledge, the wider that stance gets, the more balanced we can be. Because we're able to drift along that knowledge base, what the situation is. And for a lot of professionals, the idea of a wide knowledge base has been taken away by our education system. You have to have this knowledge. Mm-hmm. You cannot get out of the education system until you have this knowledge. And we've grown like this because that's what we do. Mm. And unfortunately, this creates an imbalance on its own.
Yeah, very top heavy, isn't it?
Exactly. When we invert that, when we have a wide knowledge base, we grow upwards. And we've got that solid ability to cope with what the world throws at us.
We need to be trees.
I was just thinking a solid foundation, not necessarily need to be a tree, but a solid foundation would be good.
Yeah, but trees' roots are like a mirror image of the branches above.
In some trees.
Yeah, I was going to say not all trees.
Well, most of them. I was going to say something. Oh yeah, the assumption thing. I had a picture in my head of what happened to me again one time when I made an assumption that the bus driver was actually going to wait for me, and that he saw me. I went running for the bus, which was at Buchanan Street bus station, on Christmas Eve. So it was the last bus, so I had to kind of get it, and it had reversed out, and so it was kind of straight in front of me by the time that I launched myself off the ground. Mid-flight, he put it into first gear, and I hit the side of the bus about 3 or 4 inches beyond where the door was, and went twirling round as he went forward and kept on driving, and ended up my backside in the middle of the car park. So that's kind of the assumption, that it was a reactive response. And also didn't really keep me in the past because it didn't stop me from doing something like that again. However,
this doesn't surprise me.
No, listen, it's been an interesting life.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's lesson
is don't follow Leslie.
Catch a bus.
Don't jump before you shout and tell the driver that you're going to do it.
Learn from your mistakes.
Well, you see, I do.
No, don't learn from your own mistakes. Leslie has a catalogue.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you need a mistake, come and ask Leslie.
and
She'll
ask
tell you what she
me.
did with hers,
Yes.
and then you do the exact opposite.
As long as the mistake was running after you, running over you, a vehicular situation, or an elephant.
Other categories are available in volumes 2, 3, and 4.
Well, you see, that's the whole thing. It's a case of when you're stuck in the idea that you've made your decision and that you go for it, and then you end up smacking into a bus instead of going through the door. That is something that is going to make you think again about perhaps doing it again, I must admit.
But did it?
Well, I have never jumped for a bus again in my life, put it that way. I've done a whole load of other things that were vaguely
Really monumental.
Yeah, Frank Spencer's got nothing on me.
Oh, Betty!
I don't have a Betty. But it's one of those things that when you're stuck, you can get really stuck. Physically, mentally, emotionally,
And physically.
stuck.
And I guess the key thing is, how do we acknowledge that we're stuck, and how do we encourage other people to notice when they're stuck and when it is appropriate to reach out and look for support?
You see, that's the thing, is the asking for help part, because we can realise that we're stuck, but how many of us actually say, "Excuse me, can someone help me?"
And this is
why
where
I said support, not help.
I know.
And this is where I think the kind of the cultural dynamic really plays its part. The UK does not have a cultural background of having those conversations before we're in crisis, and waiting until the crisis is so far down the road that we then go, okay, I can't cope, now I need to speak to someone. And part of that, I think, is because the mental health system in the UK has made it so that you can't come and get help, because this is therapy is charity, and nobody wants to be a charity case, and therefore they won't reach out until they absolutely know they need it. But also, culturally, we don't have those conversations in the first place.
It's the stiff upper lip thing, though, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's the stiff upper lip thing.
You can dress it into that, but ultimately, we don't have the conversations before the stiff upper lip needs to be put on.
Yes.
But I think there's also that awareness point as well. Are we actually aware that we need help? Because sometimes we're so stuck, we've got complete blinkers on, we can't see beyond it. You don't know it's time to ask for help. And I've had a conversation recently with someone saying, I'm now facing anxiety, and I'm so embarrassed and ashamed by it.
And that's because we don't have the conversations before the crisis, because we get into this survival mode, and we then get the anxiety of, I can't ask anybody. The people closest to me, I don't want them to worry about it. I don't want to make it worse. And all of these things that, if we'd had the cultural environment where having the conversation before the crisis, it means that when things start to get tight and the walls start to close in, there are people around us that notice that things are changing. And people go, hold on, this isn't the normal presentation that you give. So what's going on? And it's okay to have those conversations, because we're talking to people before it's a crisis.
Yeah.
And then we're not so worried when somebody says, actually, do you know what? I think you might actually need something that I can't give you as a friend. And that's, I don't want to plug it, but that's what the Yellow Heart Team initiative is about from APA, is about encouraging those conversations before there's a crisis.
But like Angela was saying, it's a case of recognising that as an issue, I mean, I don't know how many people I've spoken to. I'm sure that we all have spoken to people who actually consider stress to be the thing that makes them work. It's it's their normality. It's their way of being. They can't work without being stressed because actually they enjoy it.
You get better results when you're stressed.
Better results when you're stressed. So they actually actively stress themselves out by making deadlines and only getting the work done at the very, very end of them. Or even just right on the deadline. The last dot, the last T is crossed, the last I is dotted as the bell rings. And then it's a case of they go and they flop down and they can't sleep, they can't eat up to that point, they can't do anything, but they're running on this because they somehow believe, and I think that's the issue.
The condition.
Belief is stronger than anything
I
else.
also say it's a timing as well, because I think people thought for a few weeks I can cope. But then as the months have gone on and they've had to learn to deal with the stress and the different things that are thrown at them on a daily basis, I think people are now finding it much more difficult to cope with what they used to be able to cope with. And now they're looking for help. They're looking to talk to people and get some new ideas on how to cope with a situation that they thought would have ended a month or two ago. So the pressures now on people and families, and as a person, but both mentally and physically, because people now, I think, are looking at their homes now much more as prisons. They're not allowed to go out and exercise. And of course, as we know, mental health, exercising correspond. You need to be able to get out of the house and go walk, get a breath of fresh air. But if you're not allowed to, how then do you cope within the house? And that's when you start getting your little exercise routines and the Zoom calls. You start talking out and talking to people and reaching out to people and saying, how are you today? It's hard for people. It's finding a new way to live.
And I love that you're saying that people are they're doing the whole I'm going to cope. I'm not now. I need help. My bigger concern is those that are saying, well, I've coped this long. I've just got to suck it up. It's only going to be another week and I'm just going to keep going because I've got this far. And those are the ones that I'm worried more about, because are they falling between gaps of I'm just going to keep going?
I think they think it's the normality. I think this is now the new state of the way one works. So, and I know people that get up at 7 a.m. and they don't log off until 8 o'clock at night, because now they're having to do all this extra work at home. They can't rely on their colleagues, say, in the office. Lots of people now are leaving their jobs or being made redundant. So you've got fewer people now having to churn out more work. And because of that, the pressure then on that person. And I know a few people that don't even get a lunch break and they're at home. So you'd think if you don't get a lunch break in your own home, and that's when they start seeing, and they can't tell the difference between what is a home and what is a work desk, what is a workplace. The two have now become amalgamated.
So that's what I said at the start. We're now living at work.
Yeah. And this is where employers have really got to be put under the microscope about how they are allowing work patterns in the home. Because if the work pattern that is being allowed to evolve was allowed to evolve in the workplace, employers would be taken to court. They would not be allowed to work that work pattern of 7 in the morning till 8, 9, 10 at night without breaks. People would be going, no, boss, I'm not coming to work for that. No way. And if you're going to make me work, we go to court on it, pal.
I disagree on that one in some of the places I've worked in before.
I do.
And working time directive, I believe, was an EU thing. I don't know if it's on the statutes that came across. And in a lot of organisations, you are invited to waive your rights to follow the working time directive when you join the organisation. And
I totally get that. What I'm saying to you is, as a way forward, employers need to be held to account for that working environment. Just because it's at home does not mean that an employer should be advocating that working pattern. And yes, I know it's going to go on. Yes, I know people are going to go, don't worry, boss, I'm at home, it's fine, I can do it. Nah, this is going to create a bigger mental health collapse, not just in the economic arena, but in the civil, social arena of the fabric of the country. And when an employer understands the psychological impact of what is going on and put those things in place, then they should be recognised and celebrated for it. Because they are going to be the employers who the rest of the country looking for work are going to be looking to, as they're the examples of what I can do working at home.
Also, though, it's up to us to take some self-responsibility for our own balance, our own work-life balance, our own balance within any turbulent time. We have to also understand that we can say, this is my set of precedents, this is my work table, this is when I will work, this is what will happen when I'm at work, and this will happen when the lid goes down. There will be no emailing me or texting me or WhatsApping me or whatever it is at 8 o'clock at night to say, can you just look at this report for me? Just because they're working doesn't mean to say that you have to do it. And we have to be able to turn in and say, no, this is still my home. And this is my home time in my home.
Yes, I guess from that perspective, there are people who are very fearful that they don't want to lose their jobs, and therefore they'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
There are some situations of, I'm living alone, I've got this job, I want to keep this job, and when I'm not at work, I can't go anywhere. So for my sanity, I might as well keep working. So they're almost making a rod for their own back in that situation, because at the moment they're thinking, I just need to keep working. So they've potentially not taken their weekends, they've potentially not taken holidays, because I know when I was working in the corporate world, my attitude towards holidays was, I'm not going to take a holiday to sit at home. I'm going to take a holiday because I want to do something. And so I would always save my holidays up to go and do something. We're not currently able to go and do something. So then why take my holidays? Is it a waste? It's not. But there is that mindset of, I don't take holidays.
There are corporate companies that are actually asking their employees to take holidays now, even though they can't go anywhere. Otherwise, they will lose those holidays. They've actually been encouraged to do that. And for people that have found a balance now in this upside down world, what happens when lockdown is lifted? How do you then find this new balance, getting back into this semi-normality again of maybe commuting? How are we going to cope then with that?
Well,
and of course, if we get a third lockdown, which there are discussions going on at the moment.
I think basically we are aware of the word hybrid now. That we are going to have hybrid ways of working, hybrid ways of meeting with people, and it's going to be a case of, if you can be there in person, you'll be there in person. If not, you're going to be on a Zoom call or such, or Teams or whatever it's going to be.
And this is very much the adaptation and the flexibility of the work balance. And I think one of the things that was really missed throughout both the lockdowns is this perception that there is a reason why people don't already work from home. Homes are not set up for the working environment. And when we closed all the pubs down and we closed all of the hotels, everything else, they had the most amazing availability of potential workspace for people in their local community. That meant they could have gone out from home, commuted less because they were going to their local pub, and used the workspace within that arena. and kept all of the protections and everything else in place, and work could have carried on outside of the home. The costs to people of trying to work from home have meant electricity bills have gone through the roof that most people can't pay. And there is no protection for it. The debt level for those people that have had to work from home, upgrading their internet capacity, when you've got businesses that are set up with it, sat there empty, you know, if you think a 300-bedroom hotel, that's 300 individual office spaces.
I'm not convinced their broadband could cope with that, though.
But that becomes their burden of service delivery. But there were ways and means of doing this that didn't put the burden on families. It didn't put the debt onto individuals who ultimately have now been made redundant and are now risking their homes being taken,
but
because
like you said,
they can't cope with the environment that was thrown at them.
But that's like you said, it was a reaction, not a response.
And there's exactly the outcome of that reaction.
At the beginning, Susan, you said something interesting as well. You said that there was so much more time, and I'm like, where? Because I cannot keep up. I don't know about anybody else, but my time seems to... It's almost like the physical dead space in the body. It will get filled up.
I think a lot of it is on people's mindsets as well, and whether they're used to filling up their day or not. And I'm one of these persons that I've filled up every day since I was knee high, so I'm very used to managing my own time, and you know, but like Angela, collecting certificates and just being very busybody. But there are lots of people that aren't, and all of a sudden, just the lockdown and actually having to stop. No routine as such in place, and people thought, well, what am I going to do now? And they would literally just sit there and say, what have you done? Well, I've cooked today, and that's it. And then they wonder why then they struggle with the day. And it's like, right, you have to think about other things that you would like to do, or get a new routine established, go out for a walk, you know, look at the sunshine. And it's even those basic things.
It's weird to think that you would have to actually talk to someone about that, because it used to be that was the kind of thing that we were taught in the house by our mothers.
Yeah,
this is how you fill your day. There's no point in the day where you will not have something to do.
Yeah, it's almost like children, you know, when they're at home and say, "I'm bored."
Yeah, well, go and do something.
Yes, right.
Do something like what?
Scrabble or, you know, solitaire or something, you know, and that is, but this is adults. This is not children. These are adults saying, "I'm bored," and then
it's a year and 3 weeks since APA published the guide on isolation, and I can say that because it was published 2 weeks before the first lockdown. And that's, I was looking at it yesterday because we were looking at the conversation around balance and the way we cope with isolation. We've taken all the structures that we measured our day by and got rid of them. And when we published the isolation guide, we were literally saying, you need to find a new structure. If you're working from home, try using the same time frames that you would before. If you would commute, then go out in that time that you would commute. That becomes your time. Go out from the home, which means you're getting up at the same time. You're having breakfast, doing whatever you would have done, but you're going to use the time differently. But create that structure so you can transition from what was to what is going to be. And we said that 2 weeks before the first lockdown, and it's still valid now because there is no established support process that says anything other than you can't do this, you can't do that, you cannot do the other. No one in the established arena and the mainstream therapeutic arena is saying, here's what you can do. And the
Other than going for a walk.
Let's go take a walk.
That's the answer to everything, right?
Yeah, exactly, right?
The best
The
thing
last
you can
time this
do-
happened, we gave people things that they could do. We were being bombed by the Germans and we were telling people what they could do, not what they can't do. Dig for Victory wasn't just about the idea that we're going to need food that we can't get from overseas. It was giving people things that they could actively do. And we've done none of that.
But this is it. Actively, what you can do now is, if you don't know what to do with your day, you can call one of us. Because that's what we
the
do
team's there
every
for.
day.
But has that because we've become lazy, because we click a button and something comes up, say on TV, which entertains us for an hour, so we just switch off?
Or
So
you click
do we
another
not have-
button and your food arrives at the front door.
Yeah. You don't even have to leave the house anymore. You know, you can work from home. For all your food's delivered. You don't ever have to leave. You even have people that can come and walk your dog for you. You don't have to leave the house at all.
There's a word for that. It's called hikikomori, and it's an actual psychological condition that's been termed in Japan and South Korea, where there are shut-in teenagers, usually young people between the ages of 15 to into their 30s even, who actually live in one room in their house, and they get their food delivered to them, they get everything. They don't speak to anybody. The only thing they do to communicate is talk over gaming with avatars, and it's something that can happen to them for years, and it's become a totally imbalanced way of being in the same house even as your family.
I don't know, there's something I quite like about that.
Yes.
You've met my family, right?
Yeah, mine.
I think that's a generic statement that can apply to absolutely anybody. Tick the box here.
So anyway, when it comes to balance and getting stuck, the thing to do is remember that balance is actually a movable feast. And we are going to be continuing to move our Feast of Balance into next month, and we will see you all again then. Bye bye. And I did the wrong thing.